Hey, this is Wes Candle from AE Tuts. Today, I'm just going to walk you through the use of one of the more simple and widely used effects inside of After Effects called shatter. And let me just show you exactly what I came up with whenever I first started playing around with this. All right. So that's kind of the look I'm trying to go for here. Really what I set out to do was to design just a spacey explosion. I had seen shatter used before, and I just wanted to figure out how to use it myself. So let's go ahead and figure out how to do it. All right, the first thing we're going to want to do is create a new comp, and we'll have it at 1280 by 720. And let's go ahead and just type in our text layer. We'll use the text tool, and let's do AE Tuts. Why not? Make it a little bigger, a little more interesting. I'm personally a fan of Helvetica, so let's go ahead and let's do bold though. That way there's a little more area to explode here. All right, just make sure it's kind of centered in the comp. All right, now the way that shatter works is you apply it directly to the layer you're trying to explode. So let's go ahead and type in shatter in the effects and presets, and you select your layer and double click the effect. All right, now what popped up initially to me was a little bit confusing. I was kind of not sure what I was looking at. So basically what you're seeing here, this white grid is basically the foundation on which your text will explode, or whatever the image or whatever it is you're blowing up will explode. So right now we've kind of got this kind of brick pattern, and if we scrub forward in the timeline, you've got a bunch of flying bricks. Okay. Now, what you might have noticed is this blue circle in the center. Now, what's that? Well, it's actually the force that is exploding. You can imagine, like it's the bomb, it's the explosion that's causing all these bricks to fly around. Now, there's a lot of control with this circle here with this force, and that's really what we're going to play around with in order to create the effect. Now let's just start walking through the actual effect here, and you can kind of start to get a picture of what it's capable of. All right, the first thing we're going to look at here is the shape area. And the first thing under shapes is the pattern. Now, thankfully, you're not stuck with this brick pattern, because the shatter effect just would not be any good if we had to always just have an exploding brick wall. Now, there's all kinds of little things you can use here, and what I ended up using was the glass effect, or the glass pattern. But you can even make your own custom patterns, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and click glass, and what you see is just your basic glass shatter. Okay, as if a pane of glass is got hit by a baseball or something. Now, as I scrub through, you can kind of see how this is a little different, like kind of flying triangles, which is cool. Repetitions basically just repeats that pattern over and over again. So as I slide through, we get basically more and more pieces, which is really important, because again, if we were stuck with these large pieces, this effect wouldn't be at all dynamic. Now I'll keep it small for now, because it turns out to be kind of a render hog whenever the repetitions get pretty high, and right now I can just kind of scrub through and get real-time feedback. And shatter can be kind of a render hog. Modern computers, things are getting pretty quick. I'm on a MacBook Pro, so you can really operate this thing with pretty much with a lot of ease. So don't worry. But if you get those repetitions up pretty high, you'll have to do RAM previews or whatnot in order to see what you're doing. So for now, we'll keep the repetitions at let's keep them at 10. The direction really just rotates the pattern. Not a whole lot else. So we'll just keep that at 0. And the origin just kind of slides the pattern along. And it just repeats over and over again. So you're literally just, determining where you want the center of this pattern to be. Extrusion depth is actually a really interesting piece of shatter, and one of the reasons why I decided to first start playing with it. If you look at the piece, you'll actually see there's some depth there. Now that's pretty unique for After Effects because After Effects is not a true 3D program. You're not creating geometry in most cases, but with Shatter, there's actual geometry being created, and the extrusion depth determines exactly how thick those pieces are. So as I'm sliding it back and forth, you just kind of see them getting thicker and smaller. And I actually kind of like 0.10 for what we're doing, so we'll keep it there. All right. Now, the really important part here, there's actually several important parts here, but for what we're doing, the true dynamic nature of that animation comes from animation of the forces. Okay? Now, what can we do with this? The forces can actually be moved, so I don't have to explode from the center. They can move on the X and the Y axis. Let's back up. You can change the depth. So this actually isn't changing you see how there's also a radius control here? That's actually not changing the radius. The radius controls how big this explosion is, okay? The depth is actually talking about how far back the circle is. So when I'm playing with this, it looks like I'm changing the radius, but it's actually moving the circle back and forth. So we'll leave that at 0.1. Now the radius, I don't like to have it too big, so we'll have it at 0.25. And when I was first looking at the shatter effect, all I really did, and this I encourage everyone out there to do this, was open it up and just start playing around with the parameters until something cool started to happen. And whenever I was making that first animation, I didn't really have a strong idea in mind. I was just trying to learn the effect and see what the capabilities were. So I literally went through and I was just sliding it back and forth just until I found the setting that I liked for what I was doing. And that's a lot of what this is just discovering what is capable, what you're capable of within a given program. Okay, now strength. This actually is as you see that I'm kind of scrubbing it up here. And the particles are moving farther and farther away from the initial blast area, yet I'm not moving in time. Now, the reason for that is because as the explosion gets stronger, imagine if there was an actual explosion, and how fast would the particles move away from a nuclear bomb opposed to, I don't know, just a TNT exploding. I don't really know anything about bombs, but, a nuclear explosion is going to cause everything to fly away at a really, really fast rate. In fact, so fast that they'll vaporize whatever's near it. Not to laugh about nuclear explosions or anything, but sorry. Anyways, that's what strength does. Is it shows exactly it allows you to control how fast the explosion occurs, how quickly everything moves away from it. So we'll keep the strength at 3 because I kind of like what it was doing. And actually, one thing I didn't talk about yet was this view area. Now, right now, we're looking at wireframe and forces. Okay, so we see the wireframe, which is our pattern, and the forces, which is the blue sphere. Now, obviously, it would be good to be able to see what's actually happening to our text, and let's take a look at that. And look, it's going crazy. You can take a look at it, and the text is just flying apart. Very cool. Now, you don't usually want to work in this because, again, it can turn out to be quite a render hog. Now, with these repetitions, it's, I'm going pretty quickly here through it as I hit the space bar. So not a huge problem. But if you bumped up the repetitions to, I don't know, 69, 80, whatever, things tend to slow down quite a bit. All right, so let's go back to wireframe and forces. All right. Now, I went ahead and wrote down a couple numbers here instead of just trying to, repeat what I did randomly. We'll go ahead and just plug in exactly what I did on the other piece there. And we'll go to frame, let's try frame 30. And for force 1, we'll go to position, and we'll change that to 299 on the X and 360 on the Y. And I'll go ahead and hit a keyframe there. Now for force 2, let's change the position to 1281.6 on the X and 342.9 on the Y. All right, and we'll do a keyframe there. All right, now you might be asking yourself, where is force 2? Is it off the screen? What's going on? You know, if I scrub this back and forth, why am I not seeing it? Well, the reason you're not seeing it is because the radius is at 0. Okay, first time I turned shatter on, I was just like going crazy. I was like, why can't I see the force 2? I'm playing around, and I don't even think to look at the other settings. So, if you bump force 2, the radius up, you begin to see force 2. So we'll keep that at 0.25 as well. Sorry, 0.25. Depth at 0.1 is fine, and let's have the strength at 3 for this one as well. Okay, now let's move forward in the timeline just a little bit. Let's have it at 90. And force 2, we'll change the position to 566.1. Stays the same on the Y. And force 2, we change to 915.9. And the Y changes to 362.4. All right. And then we'll move forward just a little bit more. Go to 150. And force 1, it goes to 906. And force 2 stays the same. All right. And what you'll see, kind of an explosion, and the forces just move in and meet in the center. Now, the timing right now is not super important because that can always be adjusted. So we'll go into actually the keyframes, and I want to adjust that just a little bit. Let's have this left one go in, start going in a little bit before the other. All right, that's good. Okay, so that's all well and good. Let's go ahead and take a look at the render view, and we'll do a quick RAM preview. And we have our shatter effect. Now, to me that looks really cool, okay? It looks great. But what we're going for is more of a space explosion, okay? And in space, things are a little different than they are here on Earth. These particles right here are being treated as if, they're on Earth. Like, so if the explosion happened, they'd fall quickly to the ground. Now, how do we change that? Let's go to physics. Start playing around here. Okay, first of all, let's actually change this back to wireframe and forces. Move our repetitions down. Let's just go to 10. And we'll scrub through the timeline just a little bit. See, there's some activity. Okay, first thing you see here under physics is rotation speed. Now, as you can see, when I scrub through the timeline, the pieces are actually rotating. That one on the top right here is really showing you well. So there's some actual movement happening there. Rotation speed just toggles exactly how you can scrub up, scrub down, and change the speed of that rotation. For my purposes, let's see, I think we changed this to 0.59. Randomness, that kind of determines how far up and how far down from this number the different particles will be. or will rotate. So you can go up to 0.69 or down to 0.49 on that rotation speed. And actually, randomness is really important because you don't want to have your pieces all rotating at the same speed. That's actually a phenomenon that occurs only in the computer. Okay, only in the computer would you have some kind of like explosion, like glass breaking, and all the pieces would rotate at exactly the same speed. That's just something that does not occur in life. So one of the things that we should always try to do as animators is to make things look as organic and natural as possible. And randomness is the way that we can really do that. 0.1 will actually work fine for these. For what we're doing here, but it's something that you really want to play around with for whatever you're trying to design. Okay, viscosity. The way that you can kind of imagine what this does is imagine setting off an explosion in your backyard in open air, and then setting one off in your pool. Okay, now that explosion is going to the particles within that explosion are going to act differently in the open air than they do in the water. Why? Because water is thicker. Viscosity is just the term that they use to describe that difference. Okay, so as we move up, you can see the pieces are actually moving closer and closer to their original position. So we kind of have a high viscosity right here, and as you can see, the pieces just kind of move slowly as they explode. There's not quite that same fall. Okay, so for this, I want the viscosity to be, let's see, at 0.3. Mass variance we can keep the same. Actually, let's go ahead and bring it down to 0. The particles are going to be small enough and far enough away that there doesn't need to be any difference there. Gravity, actually, and I don't think I have to explain that to anyone, but gravity we can turn completely down because we want this to be a space explosion. Okay, gravity direction is actually not even necessary for this because there's no gravity. So as soon as you turn gravity all the way down, these two toggles right here, gravity direction and inclination, don't do anything. But for the sake of argument, I'll go ahead and turn it up, and you can see that as we rotate around, it goes to up, right, down, left. And you can just change that so that, if the particles need to fly up or whatever. But let's just change gravity out to 0 again. Okay. Now let's go to repetitions. Change it back to 100. And wireframe forces to rendered. And we'll do a quick RAM preview here. Very cool. Now let's talk a little bit about the differences, like what happened here. As you can see, there's no gravity, so they're just kind of flying out into space. But the coolest kind of little happy accident that occurred whenever I was creating this initially was this kind of interaction right here in the center. Now, what it looks like, and it looked a little better on the other one, but what it looks like here is the pieces are actually hitting each other in the center and flying apart in kind of a ring shape right here. Now that is so cool, but let me just explain what's actually happening there, because these pieces, there's not any physics happening where they hit. They're not hitting each other and then flying apart like that. What happened is actually the two forces that we animated earlier are connecting in the center and moving the pieces outward after they've already been exploded, and it just creates that look like there's that secondary impact, which made for a really cool effect. Okay, now as far as shatter goes, that's really about it. There's a whole lot of freedom here, and you can do really any kind of explosion that you want. And really, the idea behind this tutorial was I wanted to be able to show everyone that it's very powerful and just a very cool effect. Now, as far as everything else goes, like the camera movement and everything like that, I'm just going to do a really simple camera move. There are other tutorials on AE Tuts that can show you how to operate the camera in a good way, and so that's not really what this is about. But just for the sake of argument, I'm going to throw a camera in there. and keep it 28 millimeter. And we'll just animate it moving in as the explosion occurs. So let's go to like frame 30. I want the explosion to happen a little bit. We'll go to position, hit P. We'll add a keyframe. And we'll go to about the middle of the explosion. And we'll animate on the Z-axis, having the camera move in. Okay. Now, you didn't see it move in. What's the problem there? Well, that actually leads me to one more thing that we can talk about with the shatter effect. The camera system. Shatter actually has its own camera system embedded within it. So you actually don't have to have a camera present in the timeline in order to have, rotation, 3D rotation around the effect. So if let's say, for instance, I rotate the Y on the Y-axis, you'll see the entire thing rotating around. Okay. The problem with using the internal camera system is that if you wanted to embed anything else within that explosion and have it interact with the camera as well, it's not going to happen. You would have to try to figure out how to match it by eye or whatever, and that's just not feasible. It won't look good. So I usually never use this, and shatter usually will never be used on its own in the way that I used it. So what you can change it to is comp camera. So instead of using this whole setting, you can see it was grayed out. It will actually use the actual comp camera. So now we keyframed it earlier, but the camera does move in the Z space in towards the effect. Let's have it move it in a little further, actually. Put easy ease. Sorry if it goes off the screen there, but I just hit easy ease there. Okay. And let's do a quick RAM preview. And there you go. That's the shatter effect. Now, as far as everything else I did on this, there's just a quick few things that I always do as far as like color correction and whatever. Usually, what I'll do for color correcting is I'll add an adjustment layer on the top and curves. So we can just kind of play around there. Actually, we'll change this to, let's go to red. Add a little bit of a red tint to it, and maybe to blue. Kind of give there maybe just a little purple. Okay, just so there's a little bit of color there. Another thing that you can do to really add depth is go to, let's go to particular. And this is a third-party plugin by Trapcode, or actually by Red Giant Software, called Particular. And you can use any of the particle effects within After Effects for this. Particular just happens to be kind of one of my favorites and one of the industry favorites. So the way that that's used, we'll just do that real quick, is you add a solid. We'll call that Particular. And you double-click Particular and add it to the solid. Now I'm going to take away the shatter effect so you can kind of see what's happening here. Initially, it's just these kind of dots. So what we want to do, and really there's nothing to this as far as like stylistically, so it's not important what the dots are. I just want to create the illusion of more depth. So the particle emitter, let's have it be a box. And you can kind of see what I'm doing as I begin to play around with this. The emitter size will bring out on the x-axis, so we're stretching it that way. Bring it up on the Y, and then here we go. You'll really see what I'm going for here on the Z. I just want it to look like you're really kind of flying through space there. We can change the particle size to 2. I'll move it back so there's actual particles here. And we can turn back the... And now as we fly through space, there'll be a little bit more activity. It won't just be the shatter effect. Another quick thing that I did on this one was added a let's do another. Actually, we can do it on the same adjustment layer. We've got this adjustment layer, and I think what I did is I added blur, and we'll just do fast blur. And I'll bring down the effect here. And blurriness, as most of you I'm sure know, affects how blurry things are. But what you can really do, which is kind of nice, is option click this, and we'll just write in a quick expression. It's one of the most popular expressions out there. Everyone that knows anything about After Effects uses this, and it's the wiggle expression. So what you'll do is you type wiggle, and then how fast you want it to wiggle. So we'll have it go twice per second, and I want it to blur. Let's just do 3 pixels twice a second, and it will kind of flash back and forth there. So we'll do a quick frame preview. And you can kind of see now occasionally it goes out of focus, and you know that's another natural phenomenon that occurs when you're holding an actual camera. It's kind of hard to keep things in focus, and you'll see them, you know, go out of focus. So again, we're just trying to reproduce real life here. Now, there's camera shake you can add to this whole thing. You can use the wiggle expression to do that, and a whole nother level of things you can do. And as you can see, I added my on the previous one, I added my logo and my website there, my blog. And sorry for the shameless promotion, but you know, you can, once you get the effect going, you know, you can really just play around in that space. You know, there's a couple other things going on here. I think trap code shine is on there as well. And, you know, just really you can play around this and use it for whatever you you want to do. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial and you find it useful. And look forward to teaching you guys something new next time. Thanks a lot.